reach this thing. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last evening of the Fall 22 Honors Colloquium, Sustaining Our Shores. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the coordinators of this colloquium, Andrew Davies and J.P. Walsh, who conceptualized and brought to fruition this remarkable series. The speakers they invited have been so informative about the complex relationships between humans and oceans, and we are deeply grateful to them. I am also deeply appreciative that they made the decision to invite tribal citizens to open each event with a land acknowledgement. This has included tribal elders, URI alums, and a current URI student. Each contributed to our understanding of the relationship between Indigenous peoples and oceans, in particular, the emotional and spiritual connection. I believe for many of us, this has greatly deepened our understanding of the role of oceans in our lives. I am also pleased tonight to announce the Fall 2022 Honors Colloquium, which will be Just Good Food, Creating Equitable, Sustainable, and Resilient Food Systems. Professors John Taylor and Marta Gomez-Chiara are the coordinators of this coming colloquium, and I believe John is going to give us a little wave there. Thank you, John. I know we all look forward to seeing what they will bring to us next year. And always, I thank Deb Gardner and Anna Blake, without whom the Honors Colloquium truly would not happen. Deb, in particular, has been the backbone of the Honors Colloquium for decades, and the university owes her a great debt of gratitude for all that she has done. I'd like to take a moment to thank her. Finally, I thank all of you who are here in the audience each Tuesday, whether in person or virtually. We appreciate your ongoing participation, and we look forward to seeing you again next fall.
Thank you, Lynn. Good evening, everyone. I'm J.P. Walsh, Director of the Coastal Resources Center and a professor in the Graduate School of Oceanography. On behalf of my co-organizer, Andy Davies, in Biological Sciences, Martha McConnell, the honors class instructor and in the Graduate School of Oceanography, and the organizing committee, I want to welcome you to the final event of the Sustaining Our Shores Honors Colloquium. We have focused this colloquium on our shores and seas because of the tremendous challenges related to storms, sea level rise, seafood production, and pollution. This was deliberately planned to coincide with the beginning of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Also, this is, at URI, this is the 50th anniversary of the Coastal Resources Center and the 60th for the Graduate School of Oceanography, places where I work. Rhode Island is the ocean state. We love the coast here in Rhode Island. With URI's great expertise in coastal and ocean science and management, we have a responsibility to educate and help address related issues and improve our understanding of our oceans and coasts. We hope this series has helped educate, expand our discussion, and hopefully improve collaboration now and through the decade. I hope you'll also reach out to your friends and colleagues and family to encourage them to watch the videos. They're on YouTube, and you're welcome to keep watching into the future. I want to remind the audience to please wear a mask throughout the presentation tonight. That's the in-person audience. I should also welcome those watching at home or elsewhere. Thanks for joining us. To those in person, note the fire exits along in the back and in the front of the rooms. Also, the restrooms were just off the foyer where you entered. I also, before getting into the program, I want to thank the honors program, dining services, the Matunic Oyster Bar, the staff and students that have contributed to the program that you've enjoyed over this semester. Perhaps we could give a quick round of applause to everyone involved. I also want to take a moment to specifically acknowledge two people, Lynn and Deb. If you could please stand for us, thank you. Deb is in the back there. She's hiding out, and Lynn's up here up front. This dynamic duo has led the colloquium for many years. They're both retiring, so this will be their final honors colloquium. Dr. Lynn Derbyshire, director of the honors program since 2013 and coordinator of two previous colloquia, has been a wonderful leader. And Miss Deb Gardner, as we just heard, has been part of the honors team for over 20 years and is a proud URI alumni. As a token of our appreciation, we have a small gift. We'll disperse it shortly. But I'll just share what we have for you is if I can get it out, a Blue World ornament. It's one of a kind, handcrafted at the Clancy Designs glass blowing studio in Jamestown. We hope this will remind you of your global impact and especially this Sustaining Our Shores colloquium. So thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. Now I would like to introduce Miss Wanda Hopkins. Wanda has been offering her native voice in classrooms, churches, and cultural events throughout Rhode Island for more than 30 years. She's served as a Narragansett tribal councilwoman and chair of Tomaquag Museum in Exeter, Rhode Island. She currently is a member of the Native American Advisory Council at URI, where she is working on a master's degree in English. Please welcome Wanda to the stage.
Asko Akwasen, hello everyone. Thank you for having me here this evening. It's truly an honor to be invited and asked to give voice for our Native community. I'd like to acknowledge my ancestors, that I can just feel their presence here tonight. I am so grateful for them, for sustaining my strength, for being here with me even as I walk over the grounds of URI and just knowing that their presence is still here. To acknowledge the land is very important. To acknowledge the indigenous people of the land is very important. To remember that we are not a people of the past, that we are a people of the present. We have a past, yes, but we have a presence, and God willing, we will have a future. That is our hope, and that is our prayer. So tonight I'm going to give a couple of stories. I just was going over in my mind which ones to tell, and I finally just decided to settle on a story of my two Evangelines. My daughter Evangeline is 22 years old, and she is a student here at URI, and my mother Evangeline is 81 years old. So my daughter Evangeline, when she became a woman, we generally gift our young girls, when they get their moon, we give them a blanket and we start moonwalks down by the ocean. Once a month, full moon, we walk on the ocean. We talk about life. And if anybody has teenage daughters, you know the fire and energy and the turbulence they can bring to your life. Well, that was my daughter too. And so I'd bring her to the ocean and we would talk about those fierce emotions and the passions that arise in womanhood as you grow. And then I would tell her, you know, you see the ocean, you hear the turbulence, you can feel the power. However, there's a boundary there. And you must also develop a boundary for your passions and for your energy. And that's how we teach our children, our generations. We share with them knowledge, tribal knowledge, yes. Nature, we teach them, we use the shoreline to teach our children about who they are, spiritually, mentally, and physically. We still do the moonwalks, and sometimes she's teaching me. And that's part of the benefit of having sustainability as a tribal community in a place where our ancestors also walked. Now, the other Evangeline, my mother, is 81, like I've already mentioned, and she's settling down. She was a fireball all her life, and now at 81, she's starting to feel her age a little bit, although she doesn't look it. So she likes to go to the ocean and lie on the rocks, especially as if this on a sunny day when the heat penetrated the stone, and the stone is nice and warm, and we'll go down and we lie on the rock. And when we do, we think about life. We think about the burdens of life, the burdens that we carried through life, the burdens that we've helped others carry through life. We think about our mistakes. We think about our successes. We think about our hopes and our dreams, and we pray for the young people, and we pray for the old people. And we know that the stone is strong, and the stone can take all of that energy, and it can help us to reset our emotions, our minds, so that when we leave that place, we are strong. We are strong. We can continue to teach our families. We can continue to be there for our community. We can continue to do things like being here this evening. I thank you again. Katabatash, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you, Wanda. My name is Martha McConnell, and I'm teaching faculty for GSO, Graduate School of Oceanography. And I wanted to take a moment first to introduce you all to the students of the Honors Colloquium course. So students, please stand up for a moment and take a wave to the audience. It looks like almost all of you guys showed up. Okay, so there are 32, so before you sit down, there are 32 students in the class, and they represent 19 majors across the university, which is it's quite a lot, actually, for any one course, especially of 32. And as an example, in addition to biology and physics and chemistry, there's kinesiology majors, there's psychology majors, also criminal justice majors, nursing majors, poli-sci majors. So you guys get the picture of the diverse perspectives throughout the course. And I'm personally grateful to learn from these students, to see the issues of coastal pressures and marine pollution and future of seafood, learning from their diverse perspectives based on their different experiences, but also from the standpoint of their generation, has been really valuable for me. And I personally believe that a climate and ocean literate society is critical for our future, and I do believe URI plays a role. And so the issues we've been discussing are quite complex, and they can be daunting, but a common message throughout the semester from all of our guest speakers is a message of hope. And I am hopeful because of these crop of students. They are smart, they're innovative, they are bold, and I do believe the future is bright because of them. So thank you. You can sit down now. I'm done bragging about you. But finally, one of the most valuable aspects of the Honors Colloquium is when the guest speakers come into and join our classroom to share their expertise with the students one-on-one, but also to share their life experiences, their career path, and also to give advice as well. And Today was no exception. It was quite inspirational to welcome a visit from Dr. Wallace J. Nichols. Jay, as he prefers, has been called a water warrior, one who commits to helping others access their blue mind state. As you will hear tonight, his visionary ideas inspire others to find a deeper connection with nature and embrace inventive approaches to protecting ocean life, water management, and mental health benefits. Jay holds a Master's of Engineering Management degree in Natural Resource Economics and Policy from Duke University, and a PhD in Wildlife Ecology and Evolutionary Biology from University of Arizona. He has received numerous grants and awards, including a Fulbright Fellowship, the 2014 Global Achievement Award from the University of Arizona, and is a member of the Explorers Club. Jay has authored more than 200 publications and has appeared in hundreds of media outlets, including NPR, National Geographic, Outside Magazine, Vogue, Surfer Magazine, and more. His book, Blue Mind, published in the summer of 2014, is a national bestseller and has inspired a wave of media and practical applications. So welcome, Jay. Thank you. And I would love a copy of your license plate.
Microphone on. How's that sound? Good. Thank you, Martha, and yes. Thank you, Martha and Wanda, and thank you, JP and Andy, and big, huge thanks to Lynn. I didn't realize it, but as Lynn completes this decade of service to this colloquium, my presentation will sort of be a this is your life, Lynn, sort of retrospective on the past decade, and that was not planned, but it's an awfully nice coincidence. And thank you to all the students. I really enjoyed our conversation earlier today, and hopefully you also did. I think we touched on so many different interesting questions and topics, and I think it really represented the spirit of colloquium here at URI. And I've always been a fan of the programs here through the years. True interdisciplinary leadership, and that is quite rare in the world, it turns out. And this is a very special place through that ocean lens. There's always big new ideas coming from here, and it's nice to be back in Rhode Island. And got to see some family. I got to see my new niece, who was born during the pandemic, and we had not met, little May. So my somewhat audacious goal for this hour that we get to spend together is that I want, every time you see this ocean state license plate, which might be daily or maybe several times a day, or depending on how much traffic you're driving in, how many cars you go by, I want you to reflect. Use that as a cue to reflect on this semester, on what you've learned about yourself and our ocean planet, and that intricate, intimate relationship, that interdependence that we have with our water planet. So I want to maybe re-explain the license plate of the state of Rhode Island. I know that sounds kind of audacious, but let's give the idea of an ocean state of mind kind of an update. I'm going to give you kind of the main point right at the beginning, and this will make more sense. We'll come back to it later. And that is that when we over or undervalue anyone or anything, bad things often happen. We've seen that through human history, human interactions, where we diminish the other as a group or as an individual, and that leads us to behave more poorly, to make big mistakes, sometimes even tragic, horrific mistakes. And our relationship with the natural world is no different. When we undermine or undervalue water, the ocean, our lakes, our rivers, these ecosystems that we depend on, bad things happen. And so my goal for our time together, and I really think the goal of this entire semester, has been to fix that value equation, to offer a reevaluation of the ocean, not just in monetary terms, but in all senses. You know, Wanda and the other women indigenous leaders who have spoken at the beginning of each of these sessions have brought their prayers, their songs, their traditions, their stories, their love, their deep connection to share. And I think we all have much to learn and, from that perspective, and indeed we are. So URI has I'd say, as deep a relationship with this concept of blue mind as any university. This is a page out of the alumni magazine from a couple years ago, and probably one of the most beautiful articles I've seen in an alumni magazine ever. And I'm slightly biased, you might imagine, but it really is an interactive, stunningly beautiful portrayal of the relationship that the people who live and work here have with the ocean. Their motivations, their passions, their emotional connection, and their brilliant research. And you can scroll through it. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you look it up and go to the Alumni Magazine website and look at the profiles of the faculty and listen to their stories about their deep personal connections and professional connections with the ocean. Those things go side by side, and in my opinion, they accelerate and amplify each other. It's that connection that drives us. It builds our careers and, in fact, our lives. So as you came in, hopefully you were handed a blue marble. You may have had a variety of interpretations or responses to that marble. Like, what's this? Can I eat it? What's it for? What does it do? It is simply a glass marble. And if you have it handy, could you just put it in your hand? It's best if you don't drop these marbles because they will roll to the front of the room and then they're hard to retrieve from the front of the room. But if you take it and you put it right up to your eye, don't touch your eye, but look at one of these lights through it, as if it's a telescope or a microscope. And if you're doing it right, you will see cracks and bubbles and reflections. And if you're creative, you might see plankton. And if you're super creative, you might see a sea turtle swim by. But put it even closer to your eye and look through it, as if it's a looking glass. You really want to look right inside it. And that's kind of the macro close-up view of the ocean that we've spent quite a few months looking at during this semester. Now, if you extend your arm and your marble, arm's length, hold it out, that is what we look like right now from 1 million miles away. If you could fly out there magically and come back and look back, you would see something that resembles the shape and color of this marble in your hand. So here's a reminder that we live on this small, fragile, beautiful, unique blue planet. It's small, and it's also a water-based planet, which allows life to occur. So you thought this was just a marble. It's a teaching tool and a gesture of gratitude from us to you. So I'll tell you more about it at the end. But just hold it in your hand, and they're kind of good to fidget with a little bit, and they're quite nice. So talk more about the marble in a minute. I see the world not only through a marble lens, but through a sea turtle lens. I've got this thing for turtles. I love them. I dream about them. I've always liked turtles ever since I was a little kid. And this is a sea turtle we put a satellite transmitter on back in 1996, that little video of her swimming away after we released her. And after releasing her, she decided that she would swim home. And she proceeded to leave the Baja California coast and begin her migration. Little did we know that loggerhead sea turtles could swim across an entire ocean. At the time, we didn't know that any animals could swim across an entire ocean. So this was truly a groundbreaking, revolutionary turtle. We put the data online in real time so kids could follow. That was considered a really bad idea back in 1996 when people were not so into sharing. Nowadays, it's kind of the norm. And we kind of changed the conversation about what animals can do, and in fact, do when they're in the ocean. That turtle was named Adelita, named after the daughter of a fisherman who was named after a figure in the Mexican Revolution. So by extension, you may say this was a revolutionary turtle that literally helped rewrite the oceanography textbooks. And just a few years ago, my daughter came home from school, and she had just taken the PSAT exam, the one you take before you take the SAT. And she said, "Dad, there was an essay on the PSAT about your silly turtle." It was a reading comprehension essay. And at that moment, I contemplated complete retirement. It was kind of the pinnacle of a biologist's dream scenario. Your daughter has to get through your research in order to complete a PSAT exam. It really was a fantastic day. And my sort of feeling of celebrity lasted all of 15 seconds. And if you have kids, you know how that goes. And then I was back to being super uncool. But, you know, that's how it goes. So this turtle we tracked across an ocean. It opened up relationships with teachers and colleagues who knew how to do things with data that we didn't know how to do. I was told, don't put the data on the internet because somebody will steal it. And I remember talking to my graduate committee and saying, wow, that sounds scary. What do you think they'll do with the stolen turtle data? And they paused, and we thought, we couldn't think of anything other than beautiful, wonderful collaboration. And so I just continued to share ever since and kind of broke out of that mode of kind of the hoarding of data. So that is Martin Arce, fisherman, lobster fisherman from the town of Santa Rosalita, Baja California Sur, Mexico, and his daughter Adelita at the time of putting the transmitter on that turtle. So in preparation for our time together, I didn't want to give a talk that I'd ever given before. I wanted to scare myself a little bit and go out on a limb and do something different. And I decided I would review, I guess you could say, you would call it binge watch. Well, maybe while you this semester might have been binge watching Netflix, I was binge watching URI Colloquium. And my wife was like, what are you watching? Oh, yeah, the colloquium. I'm watching hours and hours of this colloquium. And so I watched all of the sessions, wonderful, educational, inspiring, interesting, diverse group of people. And I'm going to try to draw a thread or connect some dots through this semester. And I'll tell you right here, I got a little carried away and I started looking at last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and the one before that one, and the one right before that year, and then the other one right before that year. So I went back a decade. And I am not going to summarize a decade of colloquium, but in honor of Lynn, I'm going to pull out some of what I think are the interesting threads that somehow connect to this theme of water. You don't believe me, and I'm not even sure I'm going to pull this off, but that was my intention. So the wonderful, incredible Kelsey Leonard opened up the symposium, or the colloquium. And I remember she said that Shinnecock, the word Shinnecock itself, which is the name of the people that she belongs to, the tribe, means the people of the shore. And I thought, we are all people of the shore. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we all identified ourselves as the people of the shore, the people of the lakes and the people of the watersheds and the rivers, and the people of the land and the forest? But we all, in fact, are. And she reminded us of the importance of that. And that deep connection, and when you are named after the shore, you become a protector through that naming process, I believe. I think that there's a lot in a name. When asked, the panelists for the first panel on plastic pollution, each chose a word to describe their take on the topic. And one panelist, Eva, said, a wicked challenge. Anna said, ubiquitous, in reference to plastic pollution on planet Earth and in ourselves. Michaela said, innovation, and Kara added single use as her insight. I put my own addition there, which is uncertainty. There's a conversation about plastic pollution that contained an awful lot of uncertainty. And I remembered back when I first started studying sea turtles, and we tracked Adelita through an area that is now commonly known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch because of the accumulation of microplastic out there. And I remember when we first started to ring the alarm bell about plastic pollution back then, over 20 years ago, and colleagues said, oh, it's not a problem. Fast forward to this colloquium and the amazing conversations in science and research and advocacy that we heard about, and we know it's a problem. Almost every person on Earth knows that we have a plastic pollution problem and is familiar with some of the solutions. That's an advancement. I just want to stay hopeful while the topic can be overwhelming sometimes. And Dr. Chelsea Rockman said that, we know it's a problem now. There's no doubt. So that is an advancement. We don't need more research to tell us it's a problem. We need more research to help us focus our policy decisions and fine-tune the solutions. Right? I thought that was a profoundly important point. It was also mentioned during that session that we should not use the language of war. The language of war and battle and fighting all the time wears us down. And it turns the quote-unquote enemy into something that they may not actually be. It depersonifies them, dehumanizes them in some ways. And it may even just be a rude way to approach problem solving. This small army man, by the way, was removed from the stomach of a dead albatross. So I'll just put that in there. So in fact, we are in a bit of a struggle. If you would prefer not to call it a war or a fight, we have some serious challenges ahead. On the fisheries panel, we heard words like uncertain, again, understaffed. There's a lot we want to do, but we don't have the staffing. Persistent, in reference to the fishers who never give up. They never give up. They never give up. They try new things and they keep going. The idea of pride, the emotional connection to one's work and one's place, one's livelihood and one's family. And I also heard in that conversation the word hope came up several times. We heard stories about the lobster fisheries here in New England, and I thought it was interesting when Sarah described that when COVID began, it seemed like half of the state showed up to Point Judith to get lobsters. So when the first thing on everybody's mind as society was apparently collapsing was, I think I'll get some local fresh seafood. I thought that was a very interesting insight and relevant to this conversation. Rashid pointed out that in one of his early conversations about fisheries, that he made the statement that fish are more valuable than diamonds, and then engaged in that conversation about why. Why the persistence of the gift of a healthy fishery is in fact worth so much more than the consumption of diamonds. Barton Seaver, a good friend, and man, that guy's got some energy. I think he would have done like 40 laps by now on the stage, even in this first 10 minutes. I remember him saying, we used to approach it from this bad human bad, scolding, guilt, shame perspective. And then saying by our actions, we've destroyed and made sick our planet. But then he flips it. By the choices we make for dinner, we can heal and restore. I love his perspective on the idea of seafood. And some of the words that came up in the coastal panel, engagement, resilience, community was an important one. The concept of watershed, the connection between our lakes and our rivers, our wetlands and our oceans. And then imagination, really the importance of imagining the coast in the future. Visualizing it is so important to this conversation about a healthy coast. We're imagining in 50 years. That's hard. 100 years, 20 years, 30 years. And imagining the resilience that we may need, that we do need in order to adjust. Elizabeth talked about how resiliency means different things to different people, depending on where you are. Somebody might think resilience is just moving backwards, and somebody might think resilience is rebuilding in the face of disaster. Elder Gonzalez Trejo pointed out that how important language is. Not everyone speaks English, and he works with the community that he's engaged with in Spanish. But language also extends to the lingo we use that separates us from each other. Scientists and professional people often use lingo that creates a distance. Or we love acronyms. Lots and lots and lots of acronyms. You probably have waded through a lot of those around the ocean issues. And they, again, that language separates us from the people we're hoping to communicate with. We need to imagine, we have the technology and the tools to help us now to create maps of scenarios. We need to imagine the future and feel it in order to act now. So these visualizations that we saw so many of during that panel and that session are a new tool in our toolkit that help us become more emotionally engaged and committed. So if I was summarizing this entire semester in a sentence, and they say, you want to simplify as much as possible, but not too much, because then you're just going to be flat out wrong. So I think I got it. I think I got as simple as possible without being too simple. That we're putting too much into the ocean in the form of various kinds of pollution, and certainly not only plastic. We're taking too much out of the ocean, extractively, not just fisheries, but all of the things we remove from the ocean. And we're wrecking the edge. We're destroying the edge areas. And those edges, as Andy and I talked over dinner, those edges could be convergence areas in the open ocean where currents meet and productivity occurs. They could be the coastal areas where we have a lot of diversity, a lot of abundance, and a lot of economic activity. So if you flip that, the call to action is, let's put less in, take less out, and protect the edge. A simple call to action that almost encompasses every ocean issue you could throw at it. If you can think of an ocean issue that doesn't fit into one or more of those baskets, please let me know. I think it's a simple statement that captures a lot of the detail in the abundance of ideas that have been discussed this semester. So we want to put less in, including oil, waste, chemicals, and that pesky plastic. Want less of that in the ocean. Not a lot of arguments about that. I have never heard anybody say, I think we should throw more oil in the ocean. Now, there are advocates for that industry, of course, and there are lobbyists. I don't think any of them would like to put more oil just spilled in the ocean, nor plastic, for that matter. By taking less out, that means we manage our fisheries better, and especially remove or reduce this thing called bycatch, all the animals that are caught in the process of getting the species that we're after. And it was pointed out by Barton Seaver with some of Brian Scarry's beautiful photos that the shrimp fishery, the #1 seafood, has the highest level of bycatch. In fact, maybe the most damaging source of protein on planet Earth, if you really look at the biomass and the destruction and the diversity of species that are impacted by bottom trawling. Then, of course, protecting the edge. And by edges, we could mean kelp forests, like the one in our backyard in California that is a home to so many species. Could mean the coral reefs, and even the coral reefs that are being restored by groups like Force Blue, repurposing special ops veterans, their aquatic skills being used to restore coral reefs. But these coral reefs are part of this edge idea. And, I just had to throw in a sea turtle photo because sea turtles are my thing. That was actually, turtles usually don't hug on the beach before they return to the ocean. That was certainly posed and just an absolute setup. So just pointing that out. So let's take a bigger step back. If we take that marble, maybe we had it kind of like at the 50,000 foot level or kind of hovering above, but let's put it way out there and take a bigger step back. This campus is covered with these inspiring mottos about thinking bigger than ourselves. And in fact, many of those images use that NASA photograph of the Earth seen from space. The whole planet are on banners all over campus. And that photograph is named the Blue Marble. And it's the most reproduced photograph of all time for one simple reason. It's our home. It's where we live. We love it. So that photograph gets repurposed all over the place, including all over campus right now. So here at URI, the goal is to think big. So let's try. I look back at the decade of URI Honors Colloquia, and here's the list. I'm just going to kind of bop through it a little bit. It's not a deep dive. I'm not summarizing the entire decade. I think that should be a book written by Lynn, perhaps, or a next project. So disability. How do these themes connect with the ocean, with water, and with the overall theme of this semester? Well, Maysoon spoke of her disabilities, and she used humor and her talents as an actress and comedian to describe her relationship with people, her relationship to her life, and her relationship to her disability. I just thought this was kind of hilarious. She checks all the boxes on the oppression Olympics, if there were such a thing. But she's up there, she's out there, she's leading and challenging people's perceptions. And I think that is so important. My friend Martin Pollock is a veteran, British guy, served in Afghanistan, came home with neither leg and just one of his arms. And he's an inspiration. He's challenging perspectives. If you don't think you can surf, you need to talk to Martin. And when I met him, he said, you know, I was going to basically become a blob on a bar stool in a pub. That was his plan in Cornwall, England. Really, that's all he had on his schedule, was going to the pub, putting back some pints, and becoming literally a blob. And then he got hooked up with surfing. Got a paddle arm, got an adaptive board, and now he's an ocean warrior, he would tell you. Because the ocean gave him his life back, he is committed to helping save the ocean. Now, all I can say is get out of his way, because he's unstoppable, because that connection, it runs very, very deep. People like Martin are inspirations. People like Mysoon are inspirations to us. Right? He shreds. I mean, he's sometimes out with Laird Hamilton, who's a big wave surfer, and sharing stories, and he's an impressive guy. This is Naoki Higashida. He's on the spectrum, autism spectrum. And he wrote this book about his life. Oh, he was reading all kinds of books about autism. He said they're all terrible. So he wrote his own. And one of the things he says is that water is his medicine. Of all the places in the world, that's where he feels better. That's where he feels whole. That's where he feels, quote unquote, normal. Like us, as you would say. Contentedly and as freely as you. It's the water. The water needs to be accessible and healthy for that to work. But for Naoki, the water is his happy place. Okay. That's the connection. And we could go on that theme all day long, but let's keep moving through this list. Religion in America. How does religion and spirituality connect to this ocean conversation? Well, it certainly does, and I think this colloquium has led the way in pointing that out. In fact, even today, Wanda speaking about her daughter, Evangeline, and her mom, Evangeline, and their relationship with the ocean. It's a spiritual, personal, ecological, physical relationship that they are very clear about, and we should all be as clear. All spiritual traditions, all cultures, and all sacred texts refer to this thing I call blue mind. It's not a new idea that water, healthy water, has emotional benefits, that it's a place to go to heal and to soothe your soul. Philip Larkin wrote this great poem. It's one of my favorites. If I were called in to construct a religion, I should make use of water. And he goes on in some detail about how he would do that. It turns out, I believe all religions and spiritual traditions have made use of water. And not just in the sense of hydration and hygiene, but in this idea of water soothing our souls. Christo pointed out during the colloquium in 2019 that these stories that we tell are how we connect the dots and orient ourselves, how we describe meaning to the world around us. They give us a map to follow. And these stories are sometimes encoded in these sacred texts and in our spiritual traditions and in the songs that we sing and that we share. I just want to point out, sometimes I do this, that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, in the Old Testament, in the Psalms, there's the 23rd Psalm. Is anybody familiar with the 23rd Psalm? That's the one that begins, yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death. It's probably one of the most quoted passages of the Bible. But I'm going to paraphrase this. As you work through it, it says, here's the paraphrase of the 23rd Psalm. You can put this in your pocket, or you can just ignore me. But basically it says, when the shit's hitting the fan, get your ass down to the water, saith the Lord. It will soothe your soul. You can go back and read it. There's a different interpretation here and there, but that is, in fact, what that psalm says. When you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, that's a bad day, right? That's red mind. What does it say? 3,000 years ago, King David said, get your butt down to the water, man. Sit down and let it soothe your soul. This is not a new idea. This is encoded in our sacred texts and traditions. So reimagining gender, another theme. It's a poem from Claudia Rankine. She said, I don't know what the water wanted. It wanted to show you. It wanted to show you no one would come. He said, I don't know what the water wanted, as if then and now were not the same moment. He said, I don't know what the water wanted. Just a reflective, the poem goes on as a very reflective piece. What does the water want? Asking that question. What does it want? What does the water want? And the idea that water can be a place of reflection, deep reflection, on meaning, on things like gender, fundamental concepts about ourselves and our relationships to each other. Justin Feinstein at the Laureate Institute for Brain Research studies the brain when it's resting in water, floating in water. And what he's found is this state of quiescence, this state of calm that rivals anything else available to us on Earth. You would have to go to space to experience it in another realm. And he has found it to be therapeutically powerful through his clinical research. I'm going to just I'm speculating wildly here, and I'm clearly going out of my lane as a sea turtle biologist. I'm way out of my lane already, but that's kind of what we do here at a colloquium. But I'm going to propose that water was our first mirror for human beings. The first time we saw ourselves was in water. We didn't have mirrors. No, we didn't have bathrooms. We didn't have hallway mirrors or changing room mirrors. We had no mirrors, but we had water. And that was the only time we looked and saw ourselves. Reflect on who we are, what we need to be. And I think that ties in nicely to that theme. The gender roles and questions that are evolving with our society. That reflective aspect of water. And the work of Justin Feinstein, I think, is extremely relevant to connect us to our bodies and our minds while floating, that place of quiescence, where we can actually just be ourselves. Next theme, the origins theme. That was really pretty interesting, one of the more interesting, or they're all interesting, but a great colloquium there. I thought that was just a fascinating perspective from astronomer Sarah Seeger. Aliens would know that Earth had lots of water vapor in the atmosphere. Like they've been looking, they would know that because they probably need it too. And so that, maybe no surprise that they might come and check out our water at some point. But that idea that astronomers and astrobiologists are searching the universe for signs of life and using water as the first signal is profound. They have an acronym, of course. It's FTW, follow the water. That's their first pass in their search of the universe for other life. Dr. Jane Goodall, speaking about the origins of life and her incredible, beautiful insights into some of our relatives, the primates. It reminded me of a couple of quotes from her and from her colleague about what chimpanzees do when they're around water, particularly waterfalls. And you can look online and find the videos. They go to the waterfalls and they meditate. They play hard, they goof around, they throw each other around, and then they sit and stare at the water like we all do sometimes. And the only other thing that approximates it is a rainstorm. But even during the rainstorm, it's not quite exactly the same. But they have this emotional connection to water. There is no fear among biologists at this point in saying that is an emotional connection. The biology of emotion makes that completely clear. The neurochemistry of emotion is the same. They have this relationship with water. I do encourage you to look up those videos. If you Google the phrase water displays and blue mind, you'll find a bunch of videos of animals enjoying, really, really enjoying, sometimes like over the top, having a good time near and in the water. This concept of inequality, this problem of inequality, this issue of inequality, this reality of inequality was handled so beautifully by URI in the colloquium and the participants, and inspiring, and I think probably led itself to action from the people who heard the words of the attendees. we have a history of cutting people off from their water. It's not that long ago that signs were on pools and beaches and lakes and rivers that said, if you fit a certain description, you can't swim. And that was very painful. And the people I know who lived through that and are still alive still carry the pain of not being able to swim at the public pool across the street from where they lived. And they heard the kids playing. And they stood on the front porch and listened to the kids playing in the water, splashing and screaming, and they couldn't swim. They weren't allowed to. Now that's changed, and we have more work to do. We have other cases of inequalities and impacts related to water, such as the situation in Flint, resulting in a generation of young people who are afraid of water because the water coming out of their tap is scary, deadly even. So the idea of a bath or a swim or a shower has trauma attached to it. So in addition to the physical health impacts, there is an emotional health impact that goes along with that. And I think it's important to understand both of those things. Plastic pollution rears its head again in the case of inequality. You see more of it where people are marginalized. That's just a standard situation around the planet, contributing eventually to the downstream effects that impact us all. Kimberly Williams Crenshaw said that the goal of this activity should be to facilitate the inclusion of marginalized groups for whom it can be said, when they enter, we all enter. That phrase, when they enter, we all enter. She wasn't referring to water, but it feels right. It fits this narrative, this dialogue, and this conversation that we've had this semester. Now, groups are popping up all over the place who are trying to kick the doors open, not only kick them open, but kick them off of their hinges. Not only kick them off their hinges, but kick the door clear across the street so it would never be rehung ever again, allowing more people, particularly women of color, to get in the water. Right? There are places in the world where the simple act of putting on a wetsuit and going surfing might get you beat up if you are a woman. It's not okay. So overcoming that is an act of courage. And the organizations that help facilitate that are groups of brave people. Groups like Northwest Passage up in northern Wisconsin, getting kids from primarily minority, marginalized communities into the rivers, giving them masks, snorkels, wetsuits, and cameras. And it is truly fascinating and life-transforming what happens with these kids. Some of them say, I've never felt peace before in my life until now. I've never felt free before until now, once they got under the water. This isn't just an ocean conversation. This is a water conversation. The power of humor. Well, you know, humor and environmental work generally don't go together that often. There's not a lot of humor in climate change, plastic pollution, overfishing. And we don't generally encourage people to make jokes. But humor, we learned from that colloquium, is powerful. It helps us. The neuroscience of humor is so fascinating. Robert Mankoff from The New Yorker said, they didn't invent the magazine cartoon, but they did establish it, and some might say perfected it. I'll give you an example. This one seems relevant to Rhode Island right about now. Save my spot. Getting a little chilly out there. You might have the whole place to yourself if you go out there, you know, on a winter morning with your board or just your boots and your umbrella. There's another one. I just love that one. It's kind of the generational, like, ocean gazing. You know, it's a hobby. It's an activity. But as you age, I guess you pull those trunks up higher. Okay, this one might come as a surprise. I don't know if you remember this guy, but there's that one. All right. I thought that was such a great cover. Politics aside, just so evocative, that big belly flop into the pool. Sophie Scott said that whenever people laugh, it's a sign that they're feeling comfortable, feeling relaxed, they're feeling connected. And there is a neurochemical basis to that. When you feel those things, they're not just falling out of the sky into your head and are nothing. They're a neurochemical response to your environment. I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to come back from meetings, And he had always had these napkins where he had jotted jokes down. And I said, Dad, why do you have jokes on napkins? They said, oh, I had to give a talk, and I always like to start with a joke because it loosens people up and it connects people. And fast forward to now, I understand that. It's a neurochemical connection. If you fill the room with oxytocin, that's the chemical of connection, happiness. Laughter does that. Right? We tend to go more for gloom and doom, fear and guilt, and we fill the room with cortisol, which is the chemical that disconnects us and puts us into a fight or flight mode. So the argument here from this colloquium, the takeaway is, maybe tell a joke, or maybe give people a blue marble as they're coming in. A gesture of gratitude. It's a nice thing to do, and it sets us up, opens us up to connect to big ideas, to connect to new ways of thinking, to connect to each other. Being on the beach, one of the happiest places. I did a coastal trek when our daughter was 1.5 years. Dana, my wife, and I, we walked. It's going to sound crazy. We walked from Oregon to Mexico. We took 112 days and just walked and slept and ate and then did it again and again and again. We walked all the way down the coast. And everybody I met on the coast was smiling, or at least content. Generally speaking, it's a place where people go and have a good time. Now, of course, if you're a lifeguard, if your job is fishing and the weather is bad, there are clearly exceptions. Right? But when people go to visit the coast, they smile and they laugh and they connect with each other. And it isn't just the coast and ocean. It can be fountains, urban waterways. It can be lakes and rivers. Okay, cybersecurity and privacy. What the heck? How are you going to do that? Connect blue mind to cybersecurity and privacy. Easy. When we sit by the water, such as these urban fountains, it creates kind of a cone of privacy. You would not be able to hear me speaking from there, next to this fountain. But as we nudge close to each other, we can hear each other just fine, but the person 3 meters away cannot. In a world of diminished privacy, this becomes incredibly valuable. So one of the true values of healthy waters, moving waters, waves, surf, creeks, rivers, fountains, is this sense of privacy, this sense that our conversation is ours, my thoughts are mine. And these things are starting to remove the options. Not a lot of places you can go and have no cell signal. Right? Underwater is one of them so far. There are a couple places underwater where you do get a signal, but I don't recommend going there if you're trying to escape the grid. Just to walk, I've had some of my best conversations walking on the beach. And this is our friend, Carlos Costa. He's a champion freediver from Venezuela. And he speaks and writes a lot about his relationship with solitude. The solitude of freediving is only comparable to the solitude of outer space I can only imagine. This idea Julia Angwin dug into, the connection, interestingly, between pollution and privacy, that they're invisible and pervasive. They're ubiquitous and stealthy. They sneak up on you. The lack of privacy, right? And the invasion of pollution. And the harm is collective. I just thought that was a profound insight that is utterly relevant to our conversation about the ocean. There's a study that came out a few years back, 2014. Our friend Tim Wilson, psychologist at UVA, and he checked out, you might have read this, he got some college students to volunteer, and he put them in a room by themselves, and they had a button they could press. And if they pressed the button, it gave them a mild but painful electrical shock. And he said, see you in a little while. And he left for 6 to 15 minutes. And the majority of young men and a smaller percentage of young women during that 6 or 15 minutes voluntarily shocked themselves because the pain of solitude was greater than the pain of the electric shock. Now, there was one kid who shocked himself 180 times. That was an outlier. They excluded that data from the study, but Tim did mention him, and you may relate to that person, or you may think, wow, that's a sibling or a family member. But this idea of not being able to do solitude, I think, is is both profoundly sad and an important warning. And again, underlines the role that oceans and lakes and rivers and waters play in our lives. Now, connecting education and schools with water and the ocean is an easy one. Henry described the stories that we tell through our educational process as a measure of how we value ourselves, how we approach democracy and our future. The idea of blue schools, there is a blue school movement trying to bring ocean literacy, water literacy into the classroom in a way that is relevant to all children. And I added the new water cycle. Let's update the water cycle to include the cognitive, emotional, psychological, social, spiritual, health, and wellness benefits that lakes, rivers, and oceans offer us. I didn't learn it that way in fourth grade when I learned the water cycle. That was left out as if it didn't matter. But when we add it in at that level, we say that it matters. And lastly, healthcare. This another easy connection between healthcare and this concept of blue mind, or blue health, as it's being called. Some of the leading institutions are the University of Exeter Medical School, and I mentioned LIBOR in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Eastgate Britton, a big wave surfer and academic, wrote this review, systematic review of blue space interventions or therapies, how water helps heal people's emotions, their minds, and their bodies. The literature just keeps piling up, and it all points in one direction, which is yes. So we can no longer justify leaving it out of our talking points, our curriculum, our schools. And again, I applaud URI for weaving it through always, leading in that way. And it truly is a leadership position. As I look around the world of academic institutions working on oceans, and you don't see it. And I thought I would write a blue scription from my friend JP after this semester and working on this. I think it's in order, so you can carry that around. And I don't know if it gets you time off or time away, but and who will actually honor that. But I checked all the boxes. So if the surf is bad, you got options. And we'll see how it holds up. But these blue scriptions could be kind of fun. You can probably print it and put it on your refrigerator. It's probably the best use of it. Okay, I'm going to come screaming in here with the opportunities and lessons. So I sort of extracted 5 quick lessons. 1, let's change that value equation. And how do we do that? Well, we start by using the right words. The economists will catch up. They will figure out how to value certain things. But let's just stop leaving the blue mind benefits out of the conversation, of our policies, of our curriculum. Let's change that equation, right? And as leaders in this field, that's up to us. And as students of the field, it's up to you. Fix the value equation, because the broken equation, it's ruining the place. It's so broken, it's wrecking the place. We usually think of the ecological and the economic benefits, but let's also add the emotional benefits. They are real, they are quantifiable, they're well studied, and if you're leaving them out, there's really no reason other than that you don't know, and that's being kind. So the research is 10 years in. Let's just make sure we plug it in. And in fact, it isn't an additive thing. It's exponential even. It's a multiplier when you add that emotional component. It multiplies your reach, it grows our movement, it garnishes more support for policy and for funding. Now, I just asked, name some emotions that you get from water, and I got overwhelmed. This is 100 of them, and there are more. So we generally leave this out of the conversation. How and why would you leave it out? This is what water is for us. It helps us survive things like pandemics. That rush to the coast during the pandemic. Now, it put a strain on the coast, but people needed it. They needed it, and they knew it. They didn't know why. They didn't know the science, but they went there for that feeling. So important. Mary Beth points out this very well in the article that I mentioned earlier. Pride, amazement, wonder, joy, happiness, peace, respect, awe, protectiveness. It goes on. There are 100 more words. These are the feelings of the people who live here and work here, who call this place home. Their beloved ocean. That's how they speak about it. That is the connection. Why do we dial that out? I was trained, went to the 24th grade, I know, too many. Never learned any of this. In all 24 years, nobody ever said, hey, a healthy ocean has cognitive, emotional, psychological, social, and spiritual health benefits. Not once. So we need to kick that door off the hinges too. We're learning that marine protected areas protect those benefits as well, along with the economic and ecological benefits, right? And that's just starting to be quantified, starting to enter into the literature. And again, let's push that forward. I think, how cool would it be if all MPAs had an assessment of all of the benefits that fit into this category? Okay, second, let's update our water talking points, flows from number one. Update the value equation and fix our talking points. So this is directly, this week, off of the UN website. This is the 1980s way of talking about the ocean in 2021. We're slightly outdated. We talk about the oxygen, we talk about the food resources, we talk about climate and weather, talk about biodiversity, all very important. I say that as somebody with a master's degree in economics and a PhD in evolutionary biology. Very, very, very important, but not enough. And then we go on to describe the threats. We use a little fear, a little guilt, a little scare tactic, maybe some shame, and then say, hey, join us. So I told you some facts. It's really hard to make the ocean boring, but we try hard to make the ocean boring. Over and over again, most preambles to most ocean reports, textbooks, documentaries, and keynotes begin with some version of 71% of the planet is covered by water. Over 50% of the oxygen. I mean, I heard it during the colloquium, and that's not a ding, it's just what we do. It's almost, your talk doesn't count unless you say these things at the beginning. Or your documentary isn't real unless you just get that out of the way. We can do better than that, and that's a stuck place. So updating our talking points. Number three, leveraging, and by leveraging I mean long pull, little bit of force, but you get a lot of leverage, a lot of movement. Leverage existing, the no, low, and high-tech solutions. And we heard about no-tech, low-tech, and high-tech solutions. The best solutions, again, talked about it over dinner a bit, are the solutions that integrate. Opening up the archival notebooks of people who spent time in the field from 100 years ago, comparing those to the mitochondrial DNA and the mapping from space, and integrating high-tech and the most low-tech or no-tech, pencil and journal at one end. Chelsea pointed out that we have to tug on all of the solutions at the same time. We don't have an option, this or that. It's yes, now. All of them, now. Start pulling, all of them. Sarah pointed out that getting involved in science, retail, and advocacy are required to succeed as a fisher these days. That's changed. Again, it's all the above. You need to know how to fish, but you also need to know how to sell, and you better be an advocate for the ocean. That's a different world for people who fish. Rashid pointed out this intersection is where the fun and action is. These interdisciplinary things, these edges, right? That's where the fun and the action is. Turns out it's also where the biodiversity and the productivity is, right? In academia and in the ocean. Monica pointed out, if I had another lifetime, I thought this was a brilliant question. What would you do if you had another lifetime you could start over? I would immediately start an integrated fish and seaweed farm, a real showcase of what we want the world to look like. All of the things that we talk about showcased experimentally and productively, but real world. And Pam pointed out, in communities, we don't start by talking about climate change. We talk about, what are you seeing? I like to ask the question, what's your water? What's the water you first fell in love with? It's a great place to start conversations about the oceans and lakes and rivers, rather than maybe something that might be divisive and you know it. Start with, what are you seeing? Anything, changes. But we need the personal professional, and political will. Again, pulling all three at the same time to create the changes we need. And that's a glass of water. So I was reminding myself, I better take a sip. Sorry. I have a tendency to not drink enough water while I'm speaking. If you need a drink of water right now, we're coming to the end. Number 4, we need to focus on creating common knowledge and practice. And this concept of common knowledge is, I think, important. Private knowledge leads to 15% collaboration. Shared knowledge, meaning like, oh, I put it on Wikipedia, I shared it, 50% collaboration. That's good. That's a gain. But when we have common knowledge, when you know what I know, and I know that you know what I know, and you know that I know what you know, we get to this level of collaboration quickly, 85% collaboration. You can look up the study by Steven Pinker at Harvard and his colleagues. Number 5, and this is kind of where it all comes together, get near, in, on, and underwater whenever you can, in whatever way you can, and take somebody with you. You know somebody right now that needs to go with you. They're sad, they're sitting on the couch, they haven't been outside in a while, they're not doing great. You got to get them out with you on the water. So, little reminder, maybe this blue marble, you can pass this along to them, right? This gesture of gratitude is meant to be passed on. Because maybe they're feeling a little too red marble right now. And if you get stuck in that place, that red mind mode of anxiety and stress and fear, as Kelsey says, this work comes with anxiety and stress. You need to go to the water, visit with the water, take off your shoes. It's not that complicated here in the ocean state of mind. Because if you don't, you will burn out. You will break down. You will disconnect. I promise you. We've been there. You know what that feels like. You've seen it. Our first responders, our health practitioners, they're burning out because they're not being taught how to achieve this blue mind state. They're working hard. They're serving us, but they don't know where their off switch is. So fundamental to this conversation is the idea that our emotional health is the foundation of a regenerative economy, which ultimately is what all these colloquia are about, including the next one on food systems. It's about a regenerative agriculture and a regenerative economy. And I told you I love turtles. I'm going to go back to this turtle to finish up. And I tell you a little story that you may not have noticed. So we released her. She had been in captivity for 12 years. She grew to adult size in captivity. We released her off the coast of Baja. She swam away. And when this loop comes around again, and you know what happened when she swam away, but when this loop comes around again, you'll see her enter the water, swim, glide a little bit, and then pause, as if to say, right about there? Huh. That's my interpretation. I don't know what she was thinking, in fact, no idea. Not going to pretend. But she sort of pauses. And it's about the distance from the boat that the tank was in diameter, that she was conditioned to not slam her head into the side of the tank over the course of 12 years. So there she goes again. She pauses, and then she continues to swim. She imagined a wall to some degree. Right? Profound lesson. This turtle is probably my greatest teacher of my life. I would even go so far as to call this turtle my mentor. What walls do we need to swim through? Personally, professionally, as a society, politically. What are those walls that are holding us back, keeping us kind of in that place where it might be more comfortable? What are the walls we need to swim through? Are they real? Are they imaginary? Are they imaginary walls that are holding you in that space? Or are they big, thick, heavy-duty, tall, deep walls? Either way, we have to figure this out. We have some big problems to solve. We have some walls to swim through. Tracy Kidder said at the 2012 colloquium, you may not see the ocean, or he spoke there. You may not see the ocean, but right now we are in the middle of the ocean, figuratively, perhaps literally. And we have to keep swimming. We have to keep swimming. When we undervalue anyone or anything, bad things happen. But when we properly value people in nature, good things can happen. Regeneration, healing, health. So do take that blue marble with you. Do reflect on these ideas. And when you are waiting in traffic behind somebody who has this license, does anybody have this license plate, by the way? Because it looks like a good choice. If you're waiting in traffic behind someone, maybe you can ponder this colloquium, this beautiful semester of conversations and connection. And gotta end with Tay. And I'll just put that out there. Any Taylor Swift fans? Right? Okay. I guess I got 5 hands. I just thought that was pretty cool. So thank you very much, and I know we have a little bit of time for questions, and then I'll be around to sign some books. Thanks. Oh yeah, microphones.
Questions? Okay.
We did have, I said it in the class earlier today, but the questions that the students asked today were among the best set of questions I've ever engaged with in my history of sharing this conversation, and I just want to reiterate that. I wasn't just saying that because it sounded good. It's absolutely true.
So my question is, water is a resource that's depleting around the world. How can we be conservative with our use of it while still enjoying it?
Conservative with our use of water in general, or?
Just water in general.
Yeah, in California we think a lot about this kind of stuff, in terms of drought and water crisis and scarcity, and I think it's important to, when we fix that value equation, the water we use has even greater benefits. So a shower is for hygiene, but it should also be joyful. And if you recognize it and you categorize it as part of the time of day that helps you calm down, then you're getting more from that quantity of water. And I'm not saying just leave the shower running and just meditate for an hour. No, especially in California, not a good idea. But I think that when we fix the value equations, some of what happens in our perception is related to behavior change, right? So each of us consuming water in whatever way we do should approach it in the most respectful way. Certainly we don't want to wreck the place in the process of going and enjoying the water. But I don't know if that's helpful. Yes, water conservation is important. I'll tell you a little story. I did some work in Louisville, Kentucky. They have some of the best tap water, sometimes the best tap water in the country. And their water system is a public-private partnership that works quite well and is very innovative, and it has been for 100 years. And I went into a meeting with them, and they said, look, we got this problem. People are conserving water too much, so we can bill less, so we can't maintain our basic infrastructure. And I said, well, what's the problem that you want to solve? They said, we want people to consume more water. And I remember, I think my head probably spun around, because I'd come from California where we were working on the opposite issues. And here they were saying, okay, we want people to use the normal amount of water and not be cutting back. And one of the ideas was, weekly bath. Take a weekly bath and really spend some time in the bathtub relaxing. Get one of those bath bombs, put on some music you like, perhaps a glass of wine and a candle, but really, just have more bath time. That was my creative idea. Don't know if Louisville bath rate went way up or not, but it felt funny to be challenged with how do we get people to use more water. The sign that conservation of water has caught on. Yeah.
my brother and I, about 70 years ago, we went fishing, and we caught a turtle, fairly large turtle, 8-inch in diameter. And, you know, I almost cried because that turtle did not make it back into the water, you know. And it made me think, is it really committing murder by taking animals out of the water? We're really killing them even for our food. But should we, like you say, reduce the amount of animals we take out of there? It seems like we're violating that community, if you will. So should our action be, let's stop fishing, let's stop taking it out, let's stop farming, over-farming, and how do we define over-farming? I don't know how to do that, but in my mind, it's kind of killing that sector off, and I feel real bad about it many times.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Well, I think we can all agree on bycatch. So if you're trying to catch something and you kill a lot of animals in the process, that's not good. So there's a lot of effort that goes into reducing this thing called incidental catch or bycatch. Of course, we don't want to over-farm and we don't want to overfish, because this concept of infinity fish that we heard about during this colloquium, brilliant idea, goes away if you're overfishing or over-farming. That goes in the opposite direction. Now, there are people who say just leave the ocean alone. Let's just stop doing that entirely. And if you feel that way, go for it. You know, and I know people who say, well, I'll eat seafood rarely when I can see the ocean. And that's their personal philosophy. And as a result, they consume less of it. But as we start to restrict or exclude fishing in some areas and permit it in other areas, we see in some parts of the world it works quite well. So I don't eat a lot of seafood, but I work with a lot of people who fish. And when I'm with them, we eat together. And that helps maintain a relationship with them that is productive in many other ways. So that's my personal decision. I'll say it, I guess, on video and from a podium. I've eaten sea turtle, in fact. It was served to me at a sea turtle hunter's house as a gesture of respect in indigenous tradition. And it was a liver with a lime and some Tabasco sauce. And then a lot of people watching and waiting to see what I would do. And I thought I would like to get this right, respectfully so, and continue the work to bring the black sea turtle back from extinction, which we did. But that was a personal decision there. I'm not suggesting that you go out and eat sea turtle livers, by the way. That's not my point there. But yeah, but very important question, and a lot of people are working on solving that.
I think it's working now. I love the idea of changing the language and getting it right. And people who identify with the coast obviously have a more positive language about it. But people identifying with plastic pollution, it's a pretty negative. So how do you express the grave condition we're in and the challenge without using the statistics that scare everybody?
Yeah.
And how do you change that language in order to make it more effective?
Yeah, there's sort of a classic storytelling arc or a filmmaking arc and documentary. You kind of want to start on a high. If you're going to go down to the depths of a situation, you kind of do it in the middle, but then you don't leave it there. You come back up to something that's inspiring and action provoking and sustainable. So fear provokes action. It's not sustainable, generally speaking. It leads to burnout. It's hot, and it works. There's a reason why we have that emotion. But if we're constantly pressing the fear, guilt, shame, factoid buttons, we're not going to build the movement we need. So I think part of it is how we use language and tell stories and depict things. I'm not saying hide the bad news. If we deliver it in a way that is understandable and leads to action, we're way better off. I think it's also important to avoid just getting it flat out wrong. So when we say things like, the ocean is full of plastic, not. There's too much plastic in the ocean, yes. But when we say things over and over again that it's full of plastic, meaning full. Like I look out my window and I can see in the distance the bay, and I go surf out there, and a lot of times there's none plastic, you know, depending on the conditions in the day. But so it's not full. So I think it was discussed during the plastic pollution panel. The media really got the idea of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch wrong, just flat out wrong for years. It was perceived by the general public, and still is, and I field this question quite often, that there's an island of plastic out there the size of Texas, and if you wanted to live there, you could. And you could hook your boat up to it and hike across it. It doesn't exist. So now we're spending time as scientists, as communicators, as educators, and policymakers, sort of helping people back out of that scenario and then get it to a more accurate depiction of the serious problem that does exist. So psychologists have informed many campaigns, many communication campaigns around health, and less or so around the environment, and that's helpful. So my advice to nonprofits working on environmental and social issues, if you have a psychologist on your board, that's a good thing. If you're in the behavior change business, which you are, and you don't understand behavior, then you're not really in the behavior change business. So there's a low bar way to enter and improve the way we communicate, the language that we use in our organizations. It could just be by adding a board member, adding a staff member who has a background in psychology, in behavior change is also a good thing. And I think that's starting to happen. I think that we're becoming aware. And I know there are students here participating in this colloquium who study psychology, and maybe some lights are going off and saying, wow, I would love to work for an ocean advocacy organization or agency and bring my psychology background to bear on helping solve these problems.
So I think we should probably wrap up. I have one final question for you, or maybe something I'd ask you to comment on. So you highlighted that hope has been a powerful theme in the Honors Colloquium, and hope is also the state motto of Rhode Island. And yeah, exactly. And one of the things today in class, you talked about COVID, and this has been a very difficult time, and many people are struggling to find light and optimism. But you had a suggestion for people about what to do during COVID, and maybe that they were underutilizing something. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, in terms of this work on Blue Mind, well, things kind of got quiet in terms of being in the room together. Things shifted, and there was more interest than ever in this conversation that we're having among people who are feeling maybe hopeless or burnt out. And so I've been able to share ideas around getting to the water. So it might be the water in your home. It could be your bathtub. Maybe your bathtub is underutilized. Maybe it needs to be cleaned first, or maybe it needs to be rearranged. Maybe you need to equip it with the soap you like and the sounds and the candles, whatever that is. Taking a shower and being very conscious of the way the water feels when it hits the back of your neck and massages you. Just pay more attention to that the next time you take a shower. Just do that. It's easy. Don't take an extra long shower, because then we get in trouble with water conservation. But just pay close attention to how that feels, how it sounds. It's not surprising. People say they get their best ideas in the water, by the water, in the bath, in the shower. Here's a pro tip. If this is working for you, get one of those soap crayons and put it in your shower, so that when you have that brilliant idea, maybe it's a lyric to a song or a brilliant scientific breakthrough, you can write it on the wall, literally, with the soap crayon, and then you can access that idea later, and it's not lost. I know when I'm in the water, if I'm surfing or swimming, and I get an idea, and I think, oh, that's a good idea, I'll remember it, and I'll write it down when I get out. And then I get out, and I go, I don't remember anything. It just goes away like that. So just a very simple pro tip, soap crayons in the shower to write down those ideas. What I just want to add lastly, we had a question during the class today about accessing Blue Mind if you're not near the coast. I just want to point out that it's wild water, but it's also the water in your home. It's the water in your city, the fountains that we talked a little bit about. But it's also virtual, that should say virtual or visual, whether it's art, film, photography, and imaginary. So close your eyes and think of the water you love. That will shift your heart rate. It will shift your skin temperature, and it will shift your breathing rate. Assuming that you like that water, you know, if it's a giant wave crashing over your home, then that's a different experience. And the last thing I want to say, the third Blue Mind Summit we held here in Rhode Island. We hold it in a different place around the world every year. It was on Block Island, our third summit. Our 11th summit is coming up on the 12th. And it's a deconstructed summit, which means to participate, all you need to do is go online on whatever platform you access online with and share how you are putting Blue Mind into action in some way, personally or professionally. So people like our friends at Operation Surf will share their story. Artists who depict Blue Mind through their art will share their stories. And just tell your story. It could be a IG Live, could be Facebook Live, could be a photograph, could be an essay, could be a song, could be a poem, could be something very as simple as a tweet. And just share it and start that dialogue. And that's how we're doing our 11th annual summit, very deconstructed way. And then hit that hashtag and go see what other people are saying. If any of what they're saying resonates with you, join their conversation and give them some feedback. So that's happening on December 12th, all day, whatever your time zone, it's all day long. So if you're interested, and happy to answer any questions, any follow-up, anytime, really. Thank you.
Okay, so before we give them a round of applause, I want to remind you, books are for sale. We'll have signings if you want to queue up here. And let's give a final thank you to Jay, and thank you all for coming to the Honors Colloquium. Good night, everyone.